Now, join us on the program. Very pleased to have with us from Rick's Firearm Academy of Detroit. You can follow him on Twitter at DetroitCCW. Mr. Rick Ector is with us. Rick, how are you, sir?
Hey, I am doing great. How are you doing today?
I am good, man. I appreciate you coming on the program.
Always a pleasure, man.
And I really appreciate the email that you sent this morning because, look, I try to keep up with all of the Second Amendment news and information around the country, but I miss stories, and I had missed this story. And you said, hey, there's an armed citizen story out of Detroit. Don't know if you know about it. And I had not heard about this, but WJBK talking about this happened at a park in Detroit?
Yes, that is correct. And as far as the stories go, man, you have a crack staff because there are stories that literally happen in my backyard here, man, and you hear about them before I do.
Well, listen, this is, I will give all credit to the great folks that we have working here on Cam and Company, but we can always use the help. We can always use the extra eyeballs.
Right. Yeah. So, that was apparently a situation, a domestic a situation that involves a man and a woman. And as I tell in the classes that I teach, man, that, those are like the worst situations, the situations when a man and a woman are together and there's some type of violence going on. I don't condone it. I don't accept it. But those are volatile and extremely unpredictable. Many times law enforcement officers get hurt and injured by answering calls going to those types of situations. But apparently this guy was witnessing some assault that was taking place, and for whatever reason, this guy directed his attention towards the observer. And fortunately for him, he decided to put his life in jeopardy, and from the story that's being reported in the paper, he took it upon himself to defend himself.
Yeah, and as you say, I mean, this is, and it's interesting, Rick, because this is something that we think about as gun owners and those of us who carry firearms for self-defense. So your life is not threatened, your life is not in jeopardy, but you're seeing an escalating situation involving others, right? And when do you step in? This was a 27-year-old woman, her 26-year-old fiance. They were arguing. The woman took off in her fiance's truck, according to WJBK, but then returned to the park. More arguing ensued. That's when the guy breaks out the windows of the truck. The girl takes off. The bystander, the concealed carry holder, told police that the man then charged at him, leading him to shoot the 26-year-old. Commander Brian Monsey said the man believed assaulted someone else, came charging towards him. He was concerned for his safety after seeing the altercation. He asked the individual who was charging towards him to stay back. That individual didn't comply. He produced a weapon, warned him again. The CPL holder subsequently fired several shots. He then called 911, stayed at the scene, cooperated with the investigation. The suspect hit 4 times, is in critical condition. Police still investigating, but the CPL holder at this point not arrested, not facing any charges. Sounds like this was self-defense. And it does sound like this was self-defense, Rick, and not necessarily defense of others, right? Because this guy had bashed the windows of the truck and then came towards the concealed carry holder.
Right, and it seems to be a self-defense case, defense of himself, which, puts him on firmer ground than rushing to the defense of some other person. I mean, just imagine the scenario if he barged into that domestic altercation and used his firearm and actually shot the gentleman. What would she say at that point with regards to, his act of heroism? In this case, what actually happened, he's defending himself, and he doesn't have to rely on someone to support his side of the story with regards as to whether he was doing any good for her benefit. So, good for him. He survived, and, just another story to let folks know that firearms save lives and that it can happen at any time.
It can, and this is we have seen armed citizen stories on a fairly regular basis occurring in Detroit. There are clearly a lot of people who live in that city who are getting their concealed carry license. You've taught a lot of them, Rick, and I'm curious. Are you still seeing high demand for your training and for concealed carry licenses?
Yeah, I really am, and right now I believe we're all on pins and needles waiting to see what the state legislature is going to do with respect to constitutional carry. It's passed the state House, and we're waiting for the state Senate to do something when they come back from recess and see if our governor will actually sign it.
I'm curious, are you supportive of constitutional carry?
Well, I'm supportive of gun rights in general, so I support constitutional carry. I support the process by which we're permitted to carry firearms. There's still going to be a demand for individuals to get concealed carry permits, if only for reciprocity and a lot of the other nuances in the law. You still have to know when you can use that firearm, and you still hopefully will think it's important to be able to accurately hit what you're shooting. So as a firearms trainer, count me amongst those firearms instructors that's in support of constitutional carry.
You know, and it's interesting. One of the reasons why I asked that question, Rick, the Bloomberg-backed website, The Trace, today had a story about, I think they said only 60% of people who own a gun for self-defense say that they've had formal firearms training. That number goes above 80% for people with a concealed carry license. I don't know how accurate those numbers are, but it seems to me that if you want more people to get trained, and I do, obviously Bloomberg would prefer some sort of a law or regulation in place where you've got to jump through all kinds of training standards before you can even exercise a constitutional right. I go the opposite direction. I think that what we need is a culture of training, and in that, for that to take place, you've got to have the availability of training. You've got to be able to go to a range, and you look at some of these places like Baltimore, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, and it's very difficult for many people to simply access a range and to access that training. So I'm not opposed to training. I'm all in favor of training. I'm opposed to mandates before you can exercise a right. And I think of the anti-gun groups who are supposed, I guess they're gun safety groups, that's what they're calling themselves these days. If they really are gun safety advocates, then they need to be advocating for more access for people to get training.
Not only do we need access and places for people to actually shoot, we look at the drama that's unfolding in Chicago with regards to actually getting a range set up there, despite the legal victories we've had in court. But, you know, it's a culture. If you really are serious about training people, we can introduce some training in schools like they do in other states. I believe South Carolina does some version of training actually in high school. But any type of training is good. I believe that making it possible to carry a gun without a permit is going to open the doors for more people to explore firearms. And, of course, the responsible citizen is going to seek out training on some level somewhere before they start carrying and exercising the gun. So I'm looking for, if this passes this time, I'm looking for the end result to be a net positive and for people to be responsible.
Amen. Rick, listen, I appreciate you coming on the program, sir. It is great talking with you as always.
Hey, man, it's always a pleasure, and thanks for having me on. And tell my guys, the other Cameron and Mr. Pop, I said hello.
I certainly will. We will talk to you soon, and keep sending us those stories. Rick Ector from Rick's Firearm Academy of Detroit, again on Twitter at DetroitCCW.